when I was in Central African Republic. So for those of you who may not know, I was born in Central African Republic, capital city Bangui, at the Hôpital Général, so the General Hospital of Bangui. And I was raised in Bria, where I lived for, I think I lived in Bangui until probably I was like 6, 7. And then we moved to Bria, which is 600 kilometers to the eastern part of Central African Republic. And we've lived there up until I was on my 17th birthday, almost 18th birthday, when I actually left Central African Republic to continue my studies in Belgium. So to give you another background, my parents met in a nightclub, a very famous nightclub in Belgium. At the time, my grandfather, my father's dad, was the ambassador of Central African Republic to Central Africa, the ambassador to Central African Republic in Belgium. My mother was a designer who owned a store called Les Petites Heures du Matin in Brussels. That was a very, very known store for anything decoration and interior designs, etc. My mother had already gotten a name for herself as being, somebody who was a tastemaker and somebody who not only studied the Beaux-Arts, but really had a beautiful, sharp eye for, anything beautiful. And so they met at this club called the Mirage Continental. And supposedly, I guess my father stepped on my mother's toes or something like that. And, well, they probably romanticized it a little bit. But anyways, flashing forward, I think, fast forwarding, sorry, I think one of my father's old friend hid her number from him. And supposedly they had arranged for a date or something, and my father's friend who was at the club that night hid her number just to mess with my dad, and he almost didn't make it, but then eventually his friend just saying that he was really getting close to getting slapped or whatnot. I'm exaggerating that, but eventually my father got the number, and so they linked up, and I guess the rest is history. At the time, my dad was 19, and my mom was 32. And 20 years old, I was born. My dad was, I think, 20 and 21. So very, very young. My mother already had my 2 oldest brothers. And my oldest brothers were very into arts, anything creative. So as I grew up as a kid, I was always inspired by my oldest brothers, who were really into the music, really into the instruments. My eldest brother, who passed away back in 1991, I believe, was he? Yeah, 91. Was a massive, amazing drummer. And he was also an amazing painter. Like, this guy could draw on some Keith Haring vibes. He was really inspired by, Basquiat, Keith Haring, and so on and so forth. He was just this very skilled guy. He had, and his art really truly represented, his state of mind and, his personal experiences and so on and so forth. So really getting acquainted to what we call art in general, I guess sort of like planted some sort of seeds in me, and so being that my older brothers were um, out of the closet, etc. You got to remember this is, early 80s. So we are looking at, the birth of new beats, techno, and all these genres of music that are really starting to really take over the world, the underground, etc. A massive era for music. And so they were part of that. And as in Central African Republic, we didn't really have access to this kind of music. They would like record cassettes, little cassettes for me to play in my Sony Walkman or Panasonic, whatever the brand might have been back in the days. And I remember, man, it was just, sounds that I had. It was crazy, but it was amazing at the same time, and contrasting so much with what I was acquainted to, being in Central African Republic when they were in Belgium, and I was in Central African Republic, and you gotta understand, like, being in a household where your parents also have a great diversity in musical tastes, from Miles Davis to what you call this, to freaking Eric Clapton, to, I mean, you name it, man. The whole 9 yards of pop culture, jazz, funk, soul, eventually R&B. My dad wasn't necessarily too much of an R&B head, but my uncles were, especially his second younger brother. I mean, he was a big R&B head, so he also got me really into the R&B sounds. And so I had this really interesting contrast in having these influences of, electronic music, traditional, music from Central African Republic, also folklore, Central African folklore, Central African, rumba and dombolo and soukous. The whole period of the soukous time were just massive as well. All these influences really were pivotal in planting a seed in me that eventually will grow to be what we know it to be now, which is me being a music producer, DJ, etc., and so on. But at the time, being that my older brothers were musicians, they were playing guitar, they were multi instrumentalists, playing drums, guitars, percussions, etc. My father was like, okay, let me give this boy music classes. So he hired this amazing musician from back home. May he rest in peace, Maker. Man, that guy, when you're a kid, you don't. The truth is that I think as much as I like the music, I just didn't have obviously the maturity to really get into the blessing of having such a master being there and just taking his precious time and teaching me. So I really, really, really didn't put too much consideration in these classes. I was still a kid. But anyway, I do remember that he taught me a little bit of guitar. And I think the concept of the thing of guitar was that it was painful to my fingers. And I really always had a thing for drums and percussions. That was always what called me at first. Obviously, I loved the melodies, but for me, it was drums. What always called me was drums, percussions. And I wanted to really deep into that knowledge and really understanding what that was about. You know what I mean? And so, eventually, we went on to start playing some drums, and not so long after that, my oldest brother, Boris, he died. He committed suicide, 21 years old. And when at the time I wasn't told that he had committed suicide, my parents were, scared to tell me, so they said that he died from a motorbike accident. So, which either way, it doesn't really matter at this point. He's dead, he's dead. So that was my, that was my big brother, So I was devastated. And I think from that point, I stopped. My love for music just really was gone. As in, I couldn't see drums, musicianship. None of these things meant anything for me because, my big brother was gone. And it is only, I see my brother when he died, I was probably 10 years old. Yeah, 10 years old, I think. Yeah, about that. And eventually, a year or two after, I started to get that love back again. And hip hop really came through big time for me. So much so that I started, writing some lyrics, and interestingly enough, I was also being educated about drums, traditional drums, percussions, and drums being used as a mean to share messages from one village to another by the people working at the property, right? My parents had this massive property back home, and we had helpers at the house, and they really, I was really attached to just spending time with them more than anything. And so we were homeschooled. My father was a diamond dealer. My mother was into fashion and developing at the time, jewelry, potentially for entering the haute couture, high fashion. And so for me, all that was great, but I had this thing for just really getting more in touch with my roots, and understanding what was that magic, because it really for me was magic. I mean, drums made me feel a certain way. Also, we had this sound called umbroto from my region, and it's a very unique kind of sound. It's like a didgeridoo, but basically it's like this massive horn made out of wood, and it's huge, and it makes this really scary sounds. It's very scary, but it's scary, but at the same time, it's powerful, really, really powerful. So for me, that plus all the drums, there was this mystique, and there was also a lot of mysticism around that as well. Obviously, there's a big connection with spirits, with calling upon the ancestors and cleansing and the rituals of removing evil spirits, etc., etc. So there was this whole magic around these experiences for me that was just triggered my interest and my curiosity to just dive deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into understanding the healing powers of drums. Obviously, it wasn't as elaborated in my head at the time, but that was fast. I mean, thinking back and looking back, that clearly is what it was. And so hip hop really was answering that call, because I was able to then express things that was in my heart, that was in my mind, that I just couldn't express verbally. Coming from a household where, African fathers, our African dads are very strict. My dad was very, very strict. And, looking back, I'm thankful he was, but at the time, trust me, it was hell fucked up, because I was just not pulling that too much. But, he definitely wanted to make of me a respectable man, make of me a pillar, because eventually that's what happens in our educations. We raise our kids, our eldest sons and daughters, and all of our kids usually, but specifically the eldest ones, to be the pillars of the family.